Good evening. They say that music soothes the savage beast. I would like to thank Richard Penny and David H.D. Drake for their soothing music, vindicating beasts. On behalf of the Milwaukee Veterans for Peace chapter, number 102, I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to the 18th annual Reclaiming Armistice Day celebration, a day to celebrate peace and not war. You may or may not be familiar with our organization, Veterans for Peace, so I would like to read our statement of purpose that we read each and every meeting. Here is our statement of purpose. We, as military veterans, do hereby affirm our greater responsibility to serve the cause of world peace. To this end, we will work with others, both nationally and internationally, to increase public awareness of the causes and costs of war, to restrain our governments from intervening overtly and covertly in the internal affairs of other nations, to resist racism and repression in our home communities, to oppose the militarization of law enforcement, to end the arms race, and to reduce and eventually eliminate nuclear weapons, to seek justice for veterans and victims of war, and to abolish war as an instrument of national policy. That is our reason for being, and I appreciate everyone in this room because I know that you feel the same way about these issues. So it is my pleasure now, I'm going to introduce one of our own members from our chapter, Mr. Roger Quindell. He has a brief reading and reflection to share his own experiences in Vietnam, how it shaped his worldview, and his desire to use his life to wage peace. Roger Quindell.
Thank you. I served in Vietnam from 1967 to 68. And before I read the story, I just want to preface it with some information. When I got to Vietnam, there were 2 people in my unit of 80 people who I knew from high school. And we were in the base camp for about 2 weeks because it was raining and artillery units can't go out. And we're part of the communication. So when it stopped raining, we finally head up north and we're going along the western border of Cambodia. And we go for about, at the end of the road, Tainin and beyond, the villages are all gone, and all you see is 2 slabs of cement for a small village, 8 slabs, a big village. This goes on for about 40 miles. So all the villagers have been cleared out. Everywhere you look, all the grass is dead. The trees are all dead. And then there's high grass that's all been turned brown by things we sprayed on it. So we're up there for almost 4 months. And I believe we didn't get attacked or fought 2 of those months. 2 of those days. And we had deaths constantly. And there were 10 artillery units, which is a massive amount, 60 artillery pieces, 1.5 million pounds of explosives sitting around, stacked up everywhere, constantly being replenished. And we lost people all but 2 days that I remember while we were up there. And it was, it was just pretty unbelievable. And then we split up and we go back, and we end up in a village of Hakman, 1 artillery unit, and so it's like 80 people, and we're there with the Arvins. And then one night, we're there for a few days, and a rocket comes in, or 2 rockets come in, and they land, and one of them kills my best friend who's outside. I'm in the communications vehicle, and I'm badly injured, and the other 8 people in another bunker were hit. The rocket landed in it and killed all 8 of them. So it was like 9 people died, I didn't. But I did spend 81 days in a hospital and lost 40 pounds. And after 81 days there, this is my story. I was severely wounded on March 17th in a rocket attack that killed 9 other soldiers. About 5 or 6 days later, I was shipped to Camp Zama, U.S. Army hospital, 40 miles from Tokyo, Japan. While in the hospital on April 4th, Martin Luther King was murdered. After 81 days in the hospital and losing 40 pounds, the Army told me I was going back to Vietnam. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, on June 6th, as I was lined up to board a plane back, they announced that presidential candidate Bobby Kennedy was murdered in California earlier that day. 2 days later, I was sent to a fire base in the village of Trang Bang. One of the really great things about being stationed in a fire base next to this village was that you could always buy those little pleasures that were never available when in a base camp far away from any village. Those things that you take for granted until you are totally and absolutely deprived of them. Like what, you ask? You can buy a soda, you can buy a beer, you can get film for your camera, you can buy extra food from the locals. One mid-morning, a few days into my stay at Trang Bang, I bought a cold Coke from a young Vietnamese girl. Just when I turned away, I heard this Arvin, Army of the Republic of Vietnam, lieutenant, screaming at her. She quickly fled the scene. I asked a little boy I'd befriended, what happened? Did Didi Mao Mao? She go. The officers had forced her to leave. I didn't really get it. We wanted her there. I wanted to be able to buy a cold soda. Now she was gone. Hours later, she was back. I finally bought my cold soda. As I was putting the change in my pocket, the same Arvin officer raced at her, screaming once again. This time was different. He smashed her full force in the face with his rifle. She screamed in agony. I got blood on my pants leg. I couldn't believe what had happened in front of me. I was going to kill that Arvin officer. Our sergeant jumped in front of me and put his around that inhuman beast. Don't shoot him, don't. We can't have a firefight with the Arvins, our allies. Sarge, move, Sarge. Please move. I'm going to kill him. I don't want to hurt you. Other soldiers gathered and held me back. Some tried to calm me down while others helped get this monster away. We are risking our lives to put scum like him in charge? This is insane. The incident cemented my view that we were fighting for nothing. Our politicians back home and our command staff in Vietnam all knew that our allies were far more than useless. They were a menace to their own people. How can you possibly justify permanently disfiguring a young girl for selling a can of soda. I really felt this savage personally because just 3 months earlier I had 8 bones in my head broken by shrapnel from a 122 millimeter rocket. I knew what she was going to go through, but I had excellent medical care from doctors and nurses who knew what they were doing and had the equipment and medical supplies I needed. She would have little of that. So why would an army of the Republic of Vietnam, this officer, our ally, so brutally attack a young girl for selling soda? It turns out that this officer was in charge of prostitution, drugs, drink, and food sales in Trang Bang. Any Vietnamese involved in any of these businesses with American soldiers had to pay kickbacks to this officer. He would then give his commanding officer their share. I don't know if our sergeant or our officers were part of this other than renting the bunkers we built to protect ourselves for prostitution, but I wouldn't have been surprised. It was a dirty war that cost U.S. taxpayers $1 trillion in today's dollars. Some people and some soldiers would do anything to get their share. She was not part of the crew. She had to pay a price. She had to be an example. And we had to fight, be injured, and even die to keep this abomination of human behavior in place. Our sergeant promised us something would be done about this incident. We are still waiting. Thank you. And if you want copies, there's some floating around at the back of the room.
Thank you, Roger. It's now my privilege to introduce a friend of Veterans for Peace and a returning speaker. So you know he's good because he's coming back, right? Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Reggie Jackson. He is a Navy veteran. Any Navy veterans in the house? All right, you got some comrades back there. Navy veteran, an award-winning journalist, nationally and internationally recognized race relations expert, an excellent speaker, you're about to find out, and a writer, as well as a griot, which is a traditional West African oral historian. Reggie illuminates often overlooked narratives within the experience of people of color. He's a man of passion. He's a man of passion for peace and justice, and it's my privilege to welcome him and introduce Mr. Reggie Jackson.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to thank Veterans for Peace for inviting me to come back again. I believe I was supposed to be here 2 years ago. Unfortunately, 2 days before Armistice Day, I had a stroke. So it's been 2 years and 2 days since I had a stroke. I'm still here.
All right.
Thank you. My health has really gone wonderfully well. I've had some great doctors, therapists. My wife has been just like amazing, helping me through those first 6 or 7 months after the stroke. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. Literally, she helped to save my life. And the passion that I have for the work that I do is also one of the reasons I'm still here with you all. Anyone who knows me knows that I talk a lot about history. I grew up at a time where a lot of our history, particularly in my community, was never talked about in schools at all. And so I cannot remember a single history class that I took in school. People don't believe me when I tell them that, but I don't remember any. I know I took history classes, but I don't remember any of them. So what did I learn that stuck with me? Nothing that I learned in school, but I learned a lot from my family. So I was born in a little town in Mississippi called Charleston, Mississippi, 37 miles away from where Emmett Till was kidnapped and murdered at, just 10 years before I was born. And it was a segregated town, and my family was very poor. We grew up in a little bitty house. Myself, my brother, my mother, 2 of my aunts, 1 of my uncles, my grandmother, we all lived in the same house, and many cousins. We all lived in the same house. And right next door to us was my mother's grandparents, my great-grandparents on my mother's side. And so I knew from my childhood that my great-grandfather had served in the military, in the Army, when he was younger. He actually served in what was then called the War to End All Wars. We now call it World War I. And I remember seeing pictures of him in his uniform when I was a little boy. And I remember seeing other pictures of other men in uniforms. And these were my mother's uncles. My mother had 5 uncles. All 5 of them served in the U.S. military, either in World War II or the Korean War. And so I grew up in a family where military service was pretty normal. And I didn't really think about it. I was just a little boy. But I remember one of my favorite TV shows was Gomer Pyle. How many of you guys remember Gomer Pyle? That was hilarious, right? I love that show. I used to, watch it every day of the week. And I had a fascination with the U.S. Marine Corps. My best friend and I, when I was in 3rd grade, used to walk through school singing the Marines hymn. I still don't know why I did it. We just loved that song for some reason. And as I continued to grow, I had a fascination with little green army men. How many of you guys remember those little green army men? I think I had more than anybody I've ever met. I had probably 1,000 of those little green army men. I had the little army men, I had tanks, jeeps, artillery pieces, everything. I used to go out into the backyard by myself and play little war games because I just thought it was the greatest thing ever. I know that some of my older relatives loved John Wayne movies, and John Wayne was in every war movie back at that time. And that was like very heroic. War was just, the most heroic thing you could do. I learned years later that fascination that I had with the Marine Corps and military in general came from me seeing those images of my great-grandfather and my mother's uncles in uniform. And also, as I traced my family's history, I discovered about 3 years ago that my great-grandfather's great-grandfather, at the age of 53, enlisted in the Union Army in a colored troop unit in Mississippi and fought in the Civil War to free himself and his family members. And so there's a long, rich tradition of military service in my family. And as I've grown during the time that I got out of the Navy, I served 6 years in the Navy from 1983 until 1989. Fortunately, I got out 2 years before the U.S. went to war in the Middle East. And so I never served at a time where my ship, I was on USS Missouri, where we were lobbing these shells into countries and killing people. So I've never participated in any of that when I was in the Navy. I'm very proud of that. A lot of my shipmates I'm still close friends with today, stayed in the Navy and served on Missouri during the war against Iraq. And they told stories of lobbing these 16-inch shells into Iraq and killing people. And I'm glad I wasn't around to see any of that. So what I want to do, I actually wrote a speech, but I'm not going to use the speech that I wrote because something happened recently that kind of changed my mindset. I wanted to have a very kind of optimistic message for you all tonight because I know we need some of that. But something happened about a week ago. You may have read about it in the news, heard about it in the news. Something happened about a week ago, and it just really brought my spirit down to a very low level. And I've been trying to recover since a week ago. There are actually two things that happened. A good friend of mine, Jonathan Brostoff, who worked in this building, committed suicide. And then we had, that thing that happened where we have a new president-elect now. And I've been really depressed all week. And so I decided, I told my wife, I said, I'm not going to use the speech I wrote. I'm going to kind of talk about some other things. I'm going to use part of the speech. So one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight was the importance of music. And I grew up at a time where people wrote just absolutely amazing music. I was a little boy. I wasn't listening to that music. I wasn't aware of the Beatles. I knew the Beatles were big stars, but I didn't know anything about Beatles music. And so John Lennon, wrote some beautiful songs. Probably his most famous song, we all know this song, right? Imagine. And so I looked at some of the words of that song. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one, right? Most famous words of that song. Bob Marley sang a wonderful song called Get Up, Stand Up. He said, you can fool some of the people sometimes, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. And I love those words because I think they're just brilliant. And as I was listening to, some of this peace music, A couple months ago, I came across a song I had never heard of before, written by George Harrison, called Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth. And in this song, he said, give me love, give me peace on earth, give me light, give me life, give me free from birth, give me hope, help me cope with this heavy load. And so I'm carrying a very heavy load, as I'm sure many of you are, and I need some help to cope with this heavy load that we're all dealing with. You know, all these wars that are going on around the world, in the Middle East, Ukraine and Russia fighting, the war, the never-ending war in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the war that's happening in Haiti right now as we speak, that nobody is mentioning anything about on the news. It's just really a horrible state of affairs around the world, and I wish it would end. I hope that at some point we as a species come to our senses and stop doing these things, but it's going to be really hard for that to happen as long as our government and our corporations continue to send munitions and weapons of war to other places around the world. 42% of all war exports on the planet come from the United States of America. Our government continues to send money to Israel, and they continue to send 2,000-pound bombs to Israel that they're using as supposedly defensive weapons that they're dropping on schools and hospitals, refugee centers. I don't know how those are defensive weapons, but that's what they call them. And these things are never going to end until we force our government to do better. So what I'd like for you all to do, you may remember those famous words, we the people. Right? Remember those words, we the people? Oh, it's time that we the people start acting like the people and stop just allowing our elected officials to do whatever the heck they want to do. They work for us. We pay their salaries. We should demand that they do what we want them to do, not just accept that they're going to do whatever they choose to do. I tell people all the time, when I vote, I never wear the I voted sticker. Never wear it. In fact, my wife and I voted this past week, and we left and went somewhere, and someone was like, where's your I voted sticker? I'm like, it's in my pocket. I never wear it. They're like, why not? I said, because voting is just a single piece of what you're supposed to do as an American citizen. Voting is important, absolutely it's critically important, but what's more important than that is what you do after you vote. Do you hold those people you voted for accountable? Do you go and check to see what they've done, to see if they followed those promises that they made to you during the election? I told people you need to become serial harassers of the people that you vote for. Harass the hell out of them. Write them letters. Send them emails, send them text messages, write on social media. Let them know that your voice is more important than their voice, because they wouldn't have their jobs if it wasn't for us. And we need to hold them responsible. So I want you all to help me do some things. I want you to help me cope with the fact that my daughter plans to never have any children because she doesn't want to bring a child into this ugly world that we live in today. Please help me cope with that. Can you help me cope with all of the brutal updates that I see in the news about what's going on in all of these wars around the world? Can you help me cope with the pain of hearing about mothers and children being blown up with American-made bombs on a daily basis? Can you all help me cope with the constant trauma being suffered around the world in war zones by people that I'll never know, I'll never meet, but I feel their pain every day? Can you help me cope with the weakness shown by Western nations who refuse to stop providing weapons of war to places around the world? The Western nations are more responsible for wars than any other nations on planet Earth. Most weapons of war come from Western nations. And if we didn't keep building them, people wouldn't have the ability to keep using them. We need to stop building weapons of war, and that will help us move closer to peace. You're never going to have peace as long as you have corporations that people invest their money in to make weapons of war, to sell them to all of these countries around the world and make a nice return on their investment. If you look at some of the stocks of some of the biggest military weapons corporations in the U.S., their stocks have gone through the roof over the last little over a year since the Hamas attacks on Israel and the war started there. If you were investing in any of those stocks of these big American corporations that sell and make weapons of war, you would have made a nice profit over the last 13, 14 months. And so that's part of the problem. We need to address that as well. It shouldn't be a profit-making machine making weapons to kill people. That should not be something that you can profit from. That's very, very ugly. And it says something about we as people that we're okay with that. We don't have a problem with corporations building weapons to kill people with, instead of figuring out a way to help people around the world who are dealing with climate change, which people are still denying. You know, climate change is going to change the world in ways that we don't think about. One of the important ways it's going to change our country is it's going to change the pattern of immigration, not just here, but around the world. People are leaving some of the countries they live in, not because they want to come to the U.S. because it's such a wonderful country. They're leaving to survive. They're leaving those countries so that they can actually live, right? And as long as we continue to have these weapons of war destroying countries around the world, we continue to deny climate change and continue to do nothing about climate change, we're going to continue to see people come to this country as a survival technique. And I want to one day live in a world that's free of war. You know, I was born in 1965, and I didn't think about this until recently. Since I was born in 1965, there has never been a sustained period of peace on the planet since the day I was born. I just turned 59 years old on October 4th, and I literally cried on my birthday because I thought about all of the people that have died around the world in war since my previous birthday, since my 58th birthday. Now, I had a stroke a month after my birthday, and I'm still here, but I thought about, like, man, I had a stroke, I survived, but think about all the people that have died in wars, just unnecessary deaths, totally and completely unnecessary deaths. And, you know, I'm still here living to talk about, you know, all these other things. And so I want all of you to make a vow to this day to do something. Please raise your hand if you're willing to do this. Let's take control of our country. Let's become the people. Become serial harassers of the people you voted for. You know who they are. Listen. One thing that the older generation does that the younger generation needs to learn how to do, write letters. Don't send text messages or emails. Write a damn letter to somebody, right? I know, because I know a lot of elected officials, they keep track of people who communicate with them. If you send them like 10 letters over the next 10 months, they're going to remember you. If they see you walking through Mayfair Mall, they're going to be like, oh, there's that guy that keeps sending me all of these damn letters. Send them letters. Be honest with them. Tell them that you want to stop sending weapons to kill people. And I don't care where they're sending weapons anywhere on the planet. Tell them you don't want to be a part of that. You don't want your tax dollars to go towards that. You don't want your country to stand for war. You want your country to stand for peace. Please agree to do that. If you agree to be a serial harasser of your elected officials, raise your hand for me, please.
All right.
Okay, great. I'm going to hold you accountable. As if I'm here next year, I'm going to ask you to provide me proof that you sent at least one letter. At least one letter. I used to be a teacher, so that's going to be your homework next year. If I'm invited to speak next year, I'm going to ask you to bring one of those letters, a copy of one of those letters that you wrote. And so I'm out of time. We have a wonderful speaker coming up after me. And so thank you all for the invitation. Thank you for listening to me. And I appreciate you coming out tonight. And it makes me feel really good, to be here with you all. That sense of optimism that I wanted to have when I came here tonight is building back in my system because all of these wonderful people in this room with me tonight, this helps me feel better. And so keep doing what you're doing and tell friends, family members, co-workers, come with you next year to this event. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Reggie. All right, you got your homework now, right? Teacher said. I just told him, I said, hey, I was born in 65 too, and I don't look nearly as good as him, but you know, hey. Yes.
Can I just give a phone number?
Sure.
That would rather speak. I just looked it up for the White House, 202.
The White House is 202
456
456
1111.
1111.
if you want to hold me accountable.
Common?
Name.
Oh, Commons, okay. So you can call that number, and Mr. Jackson will be proud of us for having taken the action there. So there you go. Thank you for that number. Yeah. What I'd like to do now, just for a moment before I hand it off to our treasurer here in a second, I'd like to share with you just briefly a way to take action that Reggie just challenged us on. The Veterans for Peace, along with Peace Action and the UN Association and many others, are conducting what's called a Back from the Brink campaign here in Milwaukee. I just recently read a book by Annie Jacobson. The title was Nuclear War, a Scenario. It scared the out of me to read that book. We scheduled this event. I have the TikTok here. It's supposed to be 83 minutes. If someone pressed the button tonight, another country towards us, or us towards another country, our world, our planet, life on planet Earth, would be destroyed in 72 minutes. Less time than we will spend here tonight. Our entire planet would be destroyed. And because of that, we are building a coalition of peace and justice groups here in Milwaukee to ask those guys right back up there, the Milwaukee Common Council, to sign a resolution and pass a resolution to abolish nuclear weapons. 72 minutes, the world could be over. So yeah, I mean, maybe just one little resolution in one city, not a big deal, but what if resolution after resolution after resolution is passed in city after city after city, and state house after state house, and Congress and the White House, and then we get rid of these nuclear weapons, right? So let's do our homework. So here's our homework. Back in the back, there's a table, and Steve's all the way in the back there. There is a table there that you can sign up, and here's the ask. We're going to ask that you sign up, give us your name, your phone number, all of that. We're going to be reaching out to you later and helping you, but we want you to contact your Common Council alderperson and say, hey, I need you to support this resolution as it comes up. I need you to support the resolution, and the more people that make the phone calls or write the letters, right, the better. And we will press them into action to pass this resolution. They did it in Madison. We can do it in Milwaukee. So that's the ask on your way out. Please see Steve, write your name down, give us your information so we can help you make that ask of our older people, okay? So that is our ask tonight. We're building that coalition, and we want to pass this resolution because 72 minutes, it could be all over. I'd like to now hand off things to our treasurer, Mr. Paul Moriarty, who has a couple things to say.
Very quickly, I just want to thank our sponsors. You can find everybody who sponsored the event in our program. And in the back after our program, we have tables from Peace Action, Green Party, and our table, and Jewish Voices for Peace. So we're very grateful that they were all able to join us tonight. This is the 2 seconds where I put in a pitch. Events like this take some funds. Our beloved Mark Foreman is going to be handing out some buckets. If you can donate anything, we very much appreciate it. Our chapter puts on events like this every year. We donate to many peace and justice groups, and we support a lot of the coalitions and efforts that are going on in the city. So thank you for that. And then This is, I have to say, this part is probably one of my favorite parts of our program every year, and many of the years we've done this, I've gotten to introduce this wonderful man.